Hi everyone, and welcome back to another Wellness Wednesday. My name is Molly and I am the Wellness Supervisor here at Bircham Hills. So today I wanted to spend a little bit of time quickly talking about age-related memory loss, what that is, what that looks like, and some of the different ways that we can work to kind of retrain our brains and get some of that functionality back. So I want to start by prefacing that age-related memory loss is normal. If you're finding that you're starting to become more forgetful, like where did I leave my keys? What was I just talking about in that conversation that I had with my daughter, right? Those are perfectly normal things that happen as we age. Side note on that is that dementia and forms of dementia like Alzheimer's, those are not normal parts of age-related memory loss. So that is something completely separate. So we're not going to be talking about that so much today, but I always want to preface with that. So there are a couple of different things that contribute to the normal amounts of memory loss that we experience as we get older. So our body produces a number of different hormones and proteins that really help to protect and repair our brain cells. They stimulate that regrowth and that help protect against that neural decline. As we get older, we also experience a little bit less blood flow up to our brain, right? Our circulation's just not as good. And that's actually one of the reasons that exercise is so important, along with all of the other benefits that it gives you. When you exercise, it helps to drive that heart rate up a little bit, helps get that blood circulating, gets that good blood flow to the brain. It's one of the reasons you can feel a little bit more alert and sharp after you've exercised. One of the things that we'll notice with normal age-related memory loss is that it just takes us longer to recall information. That's different than us not having that information anymore. So what that means is sometimes we might have to sit there and take an extra second or two to recall the memory that we're trying to talk about. We're trying to, pull that information out of our brain. It doesn't mean that the information is gone. It just means that there's a little bit of traffic on the highway getting there. So let's take a quick second and talk about what memories actually are and how memories are formed. So I've got my little cheat sheet here, so bear with me. So memories are formed when a specific group of neurons are reactivated over and over again. And obviously the more that those neurons are reactivated over and over again, the stronger that sequence gets. So therefore, recalling a memory entails reactivating that particular group of neurons, over and over again. The more you do it, the stronger that it gets. So that's really the theory there behind memory formation, is that, the more that we recall it, the stronger those synapses get between those neurons. Makes sense, right? Kind of like with your muscles. If you don't use those muscles, you're going to lose strength, right? If we don't actively use those parts of our brain, we lose it, right? So use it or lose it. So for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with the structure of your brain, a little quick crash course for you. Neurons are basically the building blocks of your brain and your nervous system. They're responsible for taking all of the external input and stimulus of the world and basically letting your body know what's going on, right? And they also help with that motor control, so your brain telling your muscles what it wants it to do. It helps with all of the electrical signals that go throughout your body. So think of it basically as just one big electric grid, if that helps, right? So when we form new memories, it starts off as what's called our working memory. So that's kind of the stage where we're starting to learn the information, we're getting a sense of what it's about, right? It's coming into our brains. And then what happens is our brain will convert it into short-term or long-term memory. Most of our memory retention and storage happens while we sleep. And that may or may not come as a surprise to some of us. So when we sleep, our brain actually has different brain waves and different brain patterns and cycles that it goes through. If you're familiar with the term, like REM sleep, it's really interesting. You should look it up if you're not. It's really cool information. But during those different stages and cycles of our sleep, our brain is working to store all of that new information that we've accumulated throughout the day through our working memory and our short-term memory. It's working to process it and store it into that long-term memory so that we can then recall it later. That's one of the reasons why you may notice that if you didn't get a good night's sleep, or you've been really stressed and so, you haven't been sleeping a lot, why you might notice that you're a lot more forgetful during the day, or you have what I like to call kind of brain fog, where you just feel fuzzy. Everything's kind of a blur. It's how I feel most days when I'm tired. So, right off the bat, before I even give you any more tips, getting a good night's sleep is one of the best things you can do to help with your memory. So, now that we have a little bit better of an understanding, very basic understanding of what memories are, how they're formed, and some of the reasons why we might start to see memory loss as we age, I'm going to give you 5 helpful tips on ways that you can work to retrain your brain and kind of strengthen up that memory portion. So, number 1 is an oldie but a goodie, and it's simply to test yourself, right? It's one of the reasons they give us tests in schools, tests in any number of fields. They want to see what information you know. So that does not mean, sitting down and taking a book report after you read a book, right? Because no one wants to do that. What it means is after you take in new information, whether it's something that you read, whether it's something that you heard, take a couple seconds while that information is still fresh and go over it in your mind. Maybe it looks like, kind of recounting those bullet points, those important points of information. Maybe that means sitting down and talking with someone verbally about what you've just read. Focusing on this new information is what really helps to transition that new information from our working memory into that short-term and then eventually long-term memory. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is organize the information. So, this again shouldn't come as a surprise to us. When things are organized, it's easier for us to find, right? For me, if my desk is messy and I have papers everywhere, my pens are everywhere, when I'm looking for something in a pinch, oftentimes I can't find it. Memories are the same way. When we organize our thoughts and we categorize like with like, it helps us be able to kind of sort through and pull that information that we like. Think of your brain kind of like a big file cabinet, right? When your files are in order, it helps you find what you need quicker. A good example of this is actually telephone numbers. So it's a lot easier for our brains to remember little chunks and bits of information than it is for it to remember the whole. Another way you can think about it is like a chapter book, right? It's easier for us to sort the book into chapters than it is for us to think about the book as one big whole, right? So for example, with telephone numbers, most of us, when we think about telephone numbers, we don't just think about 10 digits all in a row. We think about the first 3 numbers, then the next 3 numbers, and then the last 4 numbers, right? And most of us can kind of see that in our mind's eye, how that's written out. So that's one example of how our brain can take information, chunk it down into easier bits for it to digest and store it. So we've got testing our knowledge, organizing our thoughts. Now we're going to go into math and word games. Now some people, when they hear the word math, they think, I'm out. I don't want to do that. That does not mean sitting down and going through a math workbook. What that means is activities like Sudoku, crossword puzzles, word searches, things like that. Those are great activities for our brains. We're using in some of those mathematical skills, and others we're using, reading, and some we're using word association. All of those activities are really, really great at keeping our brains sharp. They're having our brains actively search for and look, work through problems, look for solutions. So it's more of an active and engaging activity rather than being passive, right? Because sometimes, how many of us have done this if we're sitting in front of the TV and we realize, I have no idea what's been going on for the last 10 minutes, right? Our brains aren't actively engaging on what's going on. But activities like, like I said, Sudoku, crosswords, word searches, word scrambles, learning new vocabulary, those are activities that actively engage your brain. And that's gonna, again, help with that memory formation. Very similar to this, tip number 4 is learning a musical instrument. So, one thing that's really cool, studies have shown, is that music is actually a really, really beneficial tool, especially in brain development. When you expose like younger kids to music, or you have them learn a musical instrument, it helps them in a number of different areas. One of the theories is that when you're learning a musical instrument, it's kind of like learning another language, right? You have to learn all of the, the vocab, you have to learn like the alphabet of the language, which in that case is the music notes, right? And you're learning how to put things together, you're learning how to read the music, speak the music, or play the music. So there's an interesting theory about that. So one of the reasons that they suggest learning a musical instrument is that it's a demanding skill and it's something that you acquire over a long period of time. And what studies have shown is that this enhances memory in older adulthood. Now, it doesn't specifically have to be learning a musical instrument. It can be learning any type of new skill. So we can rephrase this tip as just learning a new skill, right? We're never too old to, teach an old dog a new tricks, however that saying goes. Learning a musical instrument, though, tends to be a popular and enjoyable activity, especially for seniors, because it's a great way to socialize with others. It can be relaxing, right? There's a number of different instruments to choose from. But what it boils down to is, learning a new skill. And tip number 5, got a fun little acronym for you. So it's PQRST, alphabetical order there. So let's break that down. What does that mean? So P stands for preview. We're gonna use this example specifically looking at if we were reading something, okay? But you can apply it to a number of different scenarios. So preview, if we're reading something, quickly skim through whatever it is you're reading, and just get a good idea for the content that you're reading. Just kind of get the overall, theme. Q, question. Compile a list of questions for information that either you didn't understand or questions that you need to know. So questions that you need to be able to pull from that information. R is then reread. Take that list of questions that you've just compiled and go back through that information and pull out the points that pertain to the questions that you specifically asked. S stands for study. Now that you have the answers to your question, make sure that you understand them. It's like what I know my mom always told me growing up is she goes, don't do your homework just to do it, do your homework to understand it, right? Don't read it just to read it to understand it. So once you have those answers to the questions, study them. And then T stands for test, right? And again, that comes back to making sure that you do have a thorough concept of the material that you just read. So preview, question, reread, study, and test. So those are my 5 tips for you to help work on rebuilding and strengthening up your brain. So some brain training games helps combat against that age-related memory loss. If you think that you might be experiencing memory loss beyond what might just be normal, it's always a good idea to go and talk to your doctor. So I hope that you found this information helpful. I hope that all of you have a wonderful rest of your Wellness Wednesday, and we'll see you here again next week. Thank you.